Bobby Johnson, well done, Manchester United.
Beckham into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it! And it's half saved it! United again! Ready! A magnificent goal by Robin van Persie!
Hello and welcome to United Hour, your official Red Cafe podcast for all things Manchester United. I'm your host this week, Jamie.
I'm Colm.
And I'm Alex.
Well, here we are, minutes after the final whistle.
Literally minutes.
Yes. If no exaggeration, I think that's the worst United performance I've ever seen, apart from maybe 2 or 3. So I don't think it's going to be very pretty this episode. But lads, where on earth do we begin with that?
I don't know, but I did want to just start with like a preemptive apology. So last week there was a couple of swear words from me. And I planned on coming into this episode much cleaner. That's flown out the window. Sorry, David and anybody else. Maybe we'll have to get the bleepers or edit this house. But like, it was just an absolute fucking piss take of a show performance, wasn't it? Like, we bent over and by the officials. Not that it was needed, because hero Harry Maguire made sure that we ourselves over. And you know, Jose Mourinho asked his players to be and Lamella duly obliged, lubed up and got started early. And I just think like this team, ever since Fergie left, there's been case after case of them just not having seemingly any personal or professional pride, just no backbone, no spine, just a willingness to constantly get and have no response. And it's just absolutely infuriating, like to see, you know, Pogba giving that needless penalty away late on after a terrible, terrible, terrible performance, and then getting up and laughing. Like, it's just horrendous. It was infuriating, and it's rare that football bothers me these days. But honestly, it was an on the pitch worthy performance of our off the pitch performance of recent times, because it was as much of a joke as our transfer window has been. Honestly, it was fucking awful.
I think that covers it, yeah. Colm.
Yeah, I think that's it.
See you later, everyone.
Anything to add to that, Colm? Anything else you want to say?
No. I mean, no, I was like, the first 30 minutes, I was just apoplectic with rage. Honestly, I couldn't hold it in. People were talking to me. I wanted to punch them. It was like, I was just so annoyed by everything that was happening. It was just diabolical. But after that, you know, a serene sense of just complete apathy just washed over me, and it was just like, well, is this actually surprising? Is this not just things I've seen since this season started, fed from the summer that we've had, all coming to roost with the issues that were apparent throughout Ole's tenure? And going back even further, as Alex says, since the retirement of Sir Alex Ferguson, is this today not just the culmination of just what feels like a footballing lifetime of bad decision upon bad decision upon bad decision that just resulted in this gutless, spineless, petulant, childish, ill thought out, ill prepared, lacking tactical, just mess of a football match, you know, and it was just so typical of these players, as Alex says, that it was just, you know, it just wasn't surprising, and you just go, yeah, that's just the way we are now. That's the kind of club that we are now. And you know, Spurs were in this position probably, you know, 6 months ago or whatever, you know, with their sort of Jose implosion phase, and then today they've just looked, you know, on a completely different level to us.
Yeah, they look a different team, don't they, Spurs? They look as though they've really pushed on after it looked precarious at one point under Jose last season, but they do really seem to have improved quite a lot.
I'm not ashamed to say that Kane was my captain this week, and Son was my vice captain, which I wouldn't usually do against United, but it just felt like it was going to be one of those moments, and yeah, truly was.
It was wretched. It was an absolutely wretched performance. You guys have more or less said everything that I was feeling. Certainly for the first 30 minutes, I don't remember, even with the Brighton game, even with the Palace game, I certainly don't remember being that angry watching a performance for a long time, because I know guys have spoke about the red card and this, that, and the other. None of that even comes into it for me.
No.
Because the defending, not just from the back four, as a team, the defending was just wretched, man. Absolutely wretched.
Completely agree, Jamie. And I think it's important that we just get it out there very early in this podcast that see the amount of officiating nonsense that went on in that game, the amount of odd little things, the penalties, the red cards, the decisions. Bench them, like put them to the side. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The game had a shape and a way that it was going to play out, and the result of the way that game was playing out was 6-1, regardless of whether we had 10 men on the pitch, 11 men on the pitch, or whatever, because the writing was on the wall. I think that Jimmy, you said about it being more upsetting or more anger inducing today than it was at Palace and Brighton, and the reason for that is because the problem existed against Crystal Palace. This exact same problem existed against Crystal Palace, and you went, well, maybe it's tiredness. First game back, Palace were up against it, but those defensive issues, that's a problem. And you go, okay, so it's annoying. That's annoying. It happens. That's a one-off. The problems were then re-exhibited in the identical fashion against Brighton. What is this defensive shape? What is this team structure that's allowing teams so much space in behind us, so much space on any break when we give the ball away with this high line of plodding, slow players? Why are we still so vulnerable to this when it was so apparent last week? And that was annoying against Brighton. That was doubly annoying then at that point. And then, we managed to scrape through that with the most fortuitous win that you're ever likely to come across. And then fast forward another week against a better team. So Crystal Palace, a better team Brighton. Brighton, a better team Spurs. And what have we done in the past 3-4 weeks to even... Are we aware of that? Like
Eric Bailly, silver bullet, right? Fixes all our problems.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. Except he doesn't, and he brings a whole host of his own problems, as we saw today. It's just... As Jamie says, it's the team shape. There's such a flaw in this. We have fullbacks who want to go forward but don't have recovery pace to get back. We have centre backs that are slow. Okay, Bailly's quick, but if Maguire's playing 20 yards outside the opposition's box, and it doesn't really matter what Eric Bailly's doing. And then we have two of the most lethargic holding mids that you ever likely to see. Matic is a brilliant player when we're in control of the ball. But in fractious games with big, large spaces around him, he's useless, and it's not really his fault. He just is. Pogba just is, ambling around the place looking like the most disinterested player you ever likely to see. So they are offering no protection whatsoever to an already fragile back four. And then to compound all those personnel problems, Ole is saying, I want to play a high line. I want the fullbacks to go ahead. I want us to dominate the ball and play risky passing and really camp out in their box. We don't have the quality to do it. We don't have the coaching to do it. The players don't have the ability to do it or the cleverness. There was a point where when Son got in just before the goal, and Lamela was just able to beat one player, loft the ball over the top, and that's it. It's done. That's just as easy as it is, and we are just so naive at the moment the way we're trying to play football because
completely
it doesn't suit the players we have. The system isn't working if that's what Ole's system is, and he has to be cognizant of that. He can't just keep going with this when it's been so clearly exhibited and exploited by Palace, Brighton, and then in devastating fashion by Spurs. Never mind how many players were on the pitch, because we could have had 20 players on the pitch, wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference if they're all giving performances like they were.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the things I think as well as naivety is laziness as well. I mean, okay, we're already being well beaten by the point, but when Aurier scores the 5th goal for Spurs, it's naivety, it's laziness, it's careless, whatever you want to call it. The way the players just switch off, and it is more than one, it's not just Pogba's fault. Pogba was appalling today, but when he lets the guy go, I can't remember who it was, that Shaw tracks somebody else into the box. It's just laziness, just letting Aurier run by you. Not even.
But it's the same. It's the same chance that he had in the first half, right? And and also, he was free down our left hand side all day long, and there was just no, at no point did we ever try to make any sort of amends. We didn't react to it in any way at half time. Nothing seemingly was said, or if it was, then no action was actually taken. And what the f*** do you do when we say there needs to be a response from Ollie when he's, unfortunately for me, as much as this was very much a massive team problem, I think it can be epitomised in part by hanging our hat on a captain and a future leading defender that has been making mistakes every game, maybe every other since his debut at United, and that hasn't left his game. And this season only seems to be, more and more like it. I think one of the things that annoyed me most about this game was that we started so well. To get a penalty in 30 seconds from some fantastic interplay and to dispatch of that penalty and to be 1-0 up. I moaned last week that we start slowly and that's been a problem. We didn't. We started fast. We got a goal. Fantastic. And the other thing that I moaned about last week was that other than a couple of games post-lockdown where we blitzed teams at the beginning, there's been no control since Ollie joined the club, that we've relied on individual brilliance at the top, but also individual incompetence at the back, which has undone all that great work at the top. And it happened again. We've got this early goal. That's time now to settle down, calm down, see it through, make sure that we retain that lead and get a real strong footing in the game. Make it so that Spurs have to come on to us and that we can use that counter-attacking play that has been so devastating for Ollie in the past before the signing of Bruno, because let's be fair, the big wins haven't been as forthcoming since we've started to play a higher line rather than a deep line and countering as we were doing previously. And you get absolute ridiculous, stupid defending from the likes of Harry Maguire to just completely undo that penalty and that lead. And 5-6 minutes later, we're 2-1 down. What absolute joke! That should have been. This should have been the game where we'd got that early lead and we were going to capitalise and we were going to then blitz them with a devastating counterattack. And instead, within 5 minutes, they turned that on us and then they just suckered us in and did the same. What we should have been doing back.
Yeah, I mean, we are absolute masters of self-sabotage and have been that way for a long time now. It's amazing the amount of goals that we concede that are not, hats off to you, well played. But how could he possibly do that? How could a professional footballer getting paid that? Whether it's been De Gea, whether it's been Bailly, whether it's been Lindelof, whether it's been Maguire, whether it's been the fullbacks, whether it's been someone else, penalties given away. But we love to give teams a leg up by just self-sabotage, essentially. And I think it still speaks to the mentality of the group, which I think is a big issue. I think we are prone to capitulation. I think it really lacks leadership and confidence, that team, and maturity as well, which is just the way things are sometimes. But to me, it is a problem, and I also think it feeds from the manager. I think the manager instills things in the players that are then evidenced on the pitch, and at the moment, a lot of those things are looking quite bad.
The lack of leadership is astounding.
That's the comments we were saying. It doesn't just come from the manager. We've all kind of touched on it already, but Maguire, Captain Fantastic, £80 million from Leicester. You are just shaking your head at times watching him because it's basic things he's just getting wrong all the time. And somebody put it in the chat that he's always got to be like a superhero. He's always got to be the one that makes the header, the tackle, the intervention, the interception, the big 60-yard pass up front. It's basic things that he should just be the glue in the middle of the defence, holding everybody together, instead of charging in there to situations where he's just not going to either win the ball or he's not going to come out looking favourable in the situation. But never mind even all that. The first goal that Spurs score, I don't even know where he's trying to head the ball.
I assume De Gea, but how? I mean, De Gea's about 6 feet away from him, and he only managed to head the ball 1 foot. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's amazing. It's actually impressive to header a ball so deftly, to be quite honest, especially with such a massive head. Like, it's just unbelievable what he was trying to do.
Have we been sanding his head since he joined us? I don't understand what has happened to the player that was apparently coming in to, because since Smalling, that's something we've really liked. But he was being brought in for one to score goals at the other end by getting his big head on it. Something that was basically England's whole tactical game plan under Gareth Southgate at the last World Cup. And then defending our own box, and then he isn't able to get power on the ball. But I also think usually he's not able to get the right direction on the ball. He probably got the direction rightish today, but there was just a lack of power.
Head it out the box. Just head it anywhere else. Just get rid of it instead of trying to head it back to the goalie when there's 3 Spurs players in the box.
And that's the naivety, because then the third goal was the same as passing out from. Like, why are we trying to overcomplicate things against a team like Spurs who are going to be looking to capitalise? Like, there are times when you just need to take stock and understand that you don't want to invite additional pressure on yourselves, and we did that.
Like I've said this before, and I believe it truly in my heart now, that I think Fergie had some kind of medieval pact with the devil or something like that to guarantee the success that we had, and now that's coming home to roost. That it just seems like anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and also that Old Trafford has just become this place where good players come to just regress at a frankly unfathomable pace. Like the amount of players, I mean, as you say, Maguire at Leicester, just a different player. Maguire for England during that period where the summers, just a different kind of player on the ball as well. So much more assured, able to walk it out, and we just don't see that at United. Is that because we surround him with mediocre defenders, and he's now feeling, as Jimmy says, that he has to do everything, which just makes everything worse, which is a big problem? Or is he just not that good a player? I don't know, but it's just super, super disappointing. But I think once we got that early goal, and then to give it away so quickly, I thought you immediately, within the 4 minutes there that it took for Spurs to equalise, I just saw the mentality of the team switch to one of frustration. I just think they're so fragile at the moment that, you would have thought the early goal, yes, that's brilliant, that's what we need to sell ourselves because we're not good when we don't score early. But as soon as the adversity came and that there was a mistake, everyone just seemed to throw their heads up, and that went right through the team. And then you start to see really, really bad body language, even at 1-1. In terms of players shaking their head, players looking dismissive, players looking upset at each other, players shrugging the shoulders, being petulant, things like that. It just seems to seep into our game so much. You see it from Rashford quite a lot. You see it from Martial. You see it from Pogba, hugely.
And it seeps into wider form, right? Because we've seen for Ollie's whole time at the club these purple patches of fantastic form where we're unbeaten for 10, 12, 15 games, but then that follows with a lost 3 in 6, and like we just like I think one of the things today was that it reminded me of 2 old early football bloody hell podcasts. I had a bit of deja vu moments. The first was for that second goal. Maguire, he makes that tackle, for me gives a silly foul away when, like I said, at that point we needed to just stay calm, stay composed, take control of the game, not let them get a second, because that's something that we've seen time and time again from this United in recent years. We concede one, we concede another quickly after. It's something that Nick always bangs on about. We needed to not do that. Maguire, as the captain, should know better. But anyway, he's given the foul away. Then he just casually runs back. Wan-Bissaka does the same. They didn't wake up. They didn't smell or sniff the danger. And I remember a very early podcast. It must have been probably second, third episode. Me trying to defend Tyler Blackett for giving a foul away and then sort of casually running back, and you just ripping into him for the naivety of a centre back that from early ages, early days of playing on the park, you should know. You get in front of that ball, you stop them taking it quickly, you let the team settle back and get into their positions. You don't let them take advantage of that situation and turn us over, and that's what
Absolutely.
he did.
And I think to look even more into that second goal, because I think that second goal was the key moment in the game. That totally. I mean, we were on the brink at 1-1, and then the 2-1 just we were done, completely done at that point. And I think first of all, it's a big long ball, and Son easily outjumps Wan-Bissaka and gets the header away. I mean, just uncontested, and I thought that was shameful. Son then, upon landing, having made the header, immediately starts moving towards our goal. Aaron Wan-Bissaka just kind of stands around. Maguire then rushes out. Again, I totally agree, Alex. And this is something that we've loved to do for a long time now, is just give away pointless fouls in order, I assume, to make it look like we're pressing teams. We're not pressing teams, we're just fouling them poorly. And it does nothing. It does nothing but... exactly, it does nothing. How many times a game do you see Pogba, McTominay, Lindelof, and Maguire, particularly I think they're the main offenders, just put in these sloppy late challenges through the back, as if to say, we're combative. When we're not, it's not. It's the complete opposite of being combative. It's just being lazy and slow and being turned or beaten and then giving away possession. So you saw that. So those are 2 horrible mistakes that are typifying our season. Then Maguire and Wan-Bissaka just kind of have a little conflab while Kane gets up and takes the quick free kick. Neither of them are in front of it. Neither of them are in good position. Son is now burrowing through on goal when Wan-Bissaka should have been going with them. And unfortunately, Bailly and Shaw then have to absolutely bust a gut, but they're completely sunk at that stage. And then the little icing on the cake is that David De Gea, having witnessed all this from 40 yards away, decides that the best play is to stay absolutely rooted to his line. When that ball's played through, just as soon as Kane releases that ball, most top keepers are charging out of the line because they'll see the danger. Sean Bae are never getting there. So he should be out there immediately. Never mind that. Son then takes a heavy touch because he has to sprint to get away from the other two. And he still just kind of tiptoes off the line, to the point where after that touch, a touch that Son then never looked favoured to get after that, he still has time to think it over him. Just weak. And just, it was like, again, a little microcosm of all those players' issues, one by one lined up, resulting in a goal. Wan-Bissaka fails, Maguire fails, De Gea fails. It's just, yeah, and you see it every game.
Yeah, the persistent fouling thing. I've said it in the WhatsApp chat with everyone before. It's really started to grind my gears over the last 5 or 6 games because it's just unnecessary. It's totally unnecessary to concede fouls where we concede fouls. It's not like in Man City's case where they deliberately wait till the other team's got the ball and then they just put in cynical tackles.
And the other team's attacking third, do you know what I mean? When they're maybe going to break on you, and that's a non-dangerous place to give away a foul. We love giving them away in the most dangerous of areas.
Yes, it's always around the halfway line or 5 to 10 yards inside our half. And the minute you do that, you are under pressure. And I totally agree that Maguire, I don't know why, when he fouls Kane, he should just stand on that ball. Just stand on the ball. Don't let them just play a very easy pass through. Okay, it's a good pass by Kane, but the minute he stands up and sees the hole behind him, he's just going to pass it through there every day of the week. And it's just a real lack of leadership. And we've kind of talked about it before, about the importance of a captain, the importance of leadership. That's where leadership comes in, where somebody on the pitch, when that second goal goes in, needs to grab the game by the scruff of the neck. Just grab the team and just shake them.
It's like we don't think that we can go and have an impact on the outcome of the game. It's like we just let it happen to us. And as soon as that, I think definitely somewhat the first, and then as you said, Colm, definitely the second. It's like here we go again. One of those days. We're going to get battered. Yeah. We're losing this one. Yeah. Think about the next one. Let's think about the next week. Like there was just a lack of anything, a lack of response, and then just the continued naivety after that. As I know we keep saying, is just clueless. Like it's just absolutely clueless.
To be fair, though, there was a response. That response was frustration, petulance, a red card, a penalty. That was our response, and complete naivety and continuing to try and play on the front foot when you're just getting hammered.
Let's talk about the red card, though. I know we all agree, look, in terms of the outcome of the score, in terms of the outcome of the performance, it wasn't that much of an issue. But looking at the red card in isolation, I was furious at Lamela. Because as much as it's petulance by Martial, you cannot send Martial off for that and not send Lamela off. And I haven't a clue of why, even if the ref has saw the touch from Martial on Lamela's face, and he's then sent him off. I haven't a clue of why VAR doesn't intervene and say, you need to go back and look at that, because you need to look at the incident directly before.
It's not about rescinding Martial's red. It's about saying there's something that's happened here that you haven't identified that you need to look at for it. It's like a separate, in a way, a separate incident. It's like, right, Martial's off and that's fine, he's off. That's what VAR can be thinking. But they should at least then be saying, by the way, you might want to look at Lamela as well. And if needed, just go to the cameras, just go and take a look.
Yeah, totally.
Just look for 2 seconds and you'll see what prompted him to do what he did in the first place.
Yeah, but immediately I thought of that clip of Mourinho early in the All or Nothing documentary, and I know we spoke about this already a little bit, Jamie, where he says to the team, "You cannot be nice guys, you have to be cunts." And then he said it throughout the documentary when other teams, he was like West Ham or Burnley, whoever it was, making fouls at the right times, bringing us down. They were being, they were looking to get a reaction. And I do think that's where that play comes from. I'm not saying that, Jose Mourinho is telling his players that they should be elbowing in the face and risking red cards. But what I am saying is it's getting under a team's skin. It's trying to wind them up, and it worked. Ultimately, he got the reaction he was looking for.
I mean, we see it work all the time with Pogba. Players can so easily, if they don't want to play the way he plays and want to just kick him and stuff, it can really affect him and lots of our players because we're wet. We're just a wet team. What I thought
it's
was
too easy to wind us up.
Totally, and not just wind us up, just to put us off stride, to just derail us or anything essentially. But I thought it was one of those moments where Lamela's more in the wrong. Martial taps him. Lamela takes 2 seconds and then decides to grab his face and have a lie down. And when you're watching that, I appreciate, people say Lamela has every right to do that. It's the cynical world of football that we live in. But much like the handball rule and the recent VAR decisions that we've had, I just watch that and go, why am I watching football? When this grown ass man is behaving like that. I mean, it's just shambolic. It just makes a mockery of the game. It's just farcical, and it's something that a player should never, it should be highlighted and dealt with. And I think also after the match as well, because it's essentially a dive. It's just it's an act of violence. It's then a dive. It's then hyperbolizing the situation for the ref. It's just a joke of a play. And Spurs fans or whatever will say, oh well, look, he got the player sent off, and there you go. And I'll just say, great, whatever. It just makes him look like an absolute gimp, and it's just it was just so typical. And it's another thing where just bad things happen to Manchester United. Essentially, much of them are own fault, but then other things that are just like, it just sucks the wind out of you completely. And I think again that had an impact on the team. I mean, I've played in games where there's been bad decisions, and nothing can kind of upset a team more than a sense of injustice. And teams will respond to that one of two ways. 90% of the times negatively, like what we saw. Other times, sometimes you'll get a response where they'll kind of get so frustrated about it, they'll use it to their advantage and kind of come back from that. But I think much more often and much more normal a reaction is just to go, what is even the point in us being involved here? And that was pretty much how our team played for the rest. It was very much just like a cynical, smirky, jokey, ha ha ha, we've no chance. Shaw's hack in the second half, the penalty for Pogba, it just becomes, basically something to get through with no point to it, because the whole value of the thing has just been taken away by the kind of shamble first 20 minutes.
I was surprised that there wasn't more of a reaction from the team, though, either to Lamela or to the ref.
Yeah.
It was very shrugged, it was very shrug of the shoulders to me in the response. I don't know if it's because they didn't know what happened. Or...
I think that actually could be quite a cumulative effect of like VAR, because I think now players are just so used to the fact that decisions are going to be absolutely daft. I think the handballs, the offsides, the red cards and the penalties and things like that, the players are now just slightly apathetic towards refereeing decisions. Previously,
but VAR there should be that should be the ref's only seeing one half of it. It should be where VAR's coming into play.
You saw Martial have that sort of awkward slow walk and then hung around the touchline as if he was expecting something from that. But I think generally, if I was a player at the moment with the kind of decisions that are being bandying around, it would be just grim acceptance, to be honest, because long gone are the days of like 10 Chelsea players surrounding the ref for every contentious decision in a big game, which I think is such a sad thing, because it was such a dramatic, variance. And yes, you got bad decisions, good decisions, teams influence refs or whatever, but now it's like no one cares. Now it's just like the ref's going to do something daft. There's just an acceptance that we have no control over this, and also the decision isn't going to be correct, so you may as well just just accept it, and sure, what's the point? And I think that's how we played, with apathy.
But just to be clear, are you sympathizing with Martial? Are you angry with him for maybe a lack of professionalism? Do you feel it's an instant reaction, in fairness, to being shoved in the chin, right? And
it's
stupid. And I feel like it's probably it's petulant and it's stupid. And
to me, they should both have yellows, and the game should go on, and it'll be a better game forward. I think a good ref makes that decision quite plainly, and I think if he had gone and looked at it for longer, he could have made that decision as well. I don't really lay too much blame at Martial's feet. Again, that incident for me is totally secondary, to the issues in that game. So I'm not looking at it as a big make weight thing. I know people will make the point that, look, we were in the game at 2-1, and to be fair, we should probably spend a small amount of time on that. We we probably were. There was actually some decent football even after the two calamity goals. I thought we still reacted quite positively in the kind of middle to end of the first half.
Yeah.
And I thought we were forcing the ball. We were really trying to ping the ball through the lines to Bruno.
Yeah.
And there was runs coming in from Rashford, from out wide, from Greenwood. Greenwood had 2 or 3 strikes. And I thought we were playing with a fair bit of purpose in our attack and play. The defensive frailties and the whole team shape was an unmitigated disaster throughout. But there was definitely, it was just a bit of a basketball game in any event. So it kind of plays into how we like to play in terms of forcing it quickly through to Bruno to make things happen. But there was a patch where we did look dangerous in our own right. But I mean, Spurs always looked A, much more compact defensively, and B, much more threatening with all the space left in behind, and had the much better chances even before the send off and after it was 3-4-5-6-1, But there were it wasn't just all awful in that sense.
They were clearly sucking us in and happy to take on the pressure, knowing that they could counter. But you're right that in fairness, we looked like that there was something that we could do with that. I'm convinced that they would have had a few more. I think the game might have finished 5-3, 4-3, something like that. Maybe not 6-1, but I'm convinced that we were losing either way. But Bruno in particular, I thought looked like, after not having, not starting this season with the best of form, I thought he looked like he was on it today, potentially. Had the team been set up better behind him and he had a better foundation to work with, I thought he started the game really well. And actually, the changes at halftime, damage control, bringing on McTominay and Fred, I thought was the right decision. But to take off Bruno, which I kind of get because he needs a rest and we never seemingly really rest him. But at the same time, he was the only person in the remainder of that first half who was up for it and on it and, being aggressive and showing some leadership.
I think he was rewarded for that with a break. I think it was stay you on, Pogba, and take your 90 minutes because you've been awful. I think it was that kind of a message from Ole in terms of at least Bruno shown something. You can have a rest before. I mean, it's going into international duty anyway. It doesn't, it doesn't even matter. And that's another really upsetting part, that we just have to sit and stew on this now for whatever 2 weeks. Ugh.
Well, let's talk about Pogba then, because I thought he did, in the terms of the end of the first half, I thought he was growing into the game. I thought he was trying to have a bit more of influence on the game. But
is this before the red or after the, at what point is this? Because I thought he was growing into it, when it was 2-1, but then after that red, I just thought he totally lost it again.
I think it's probably before. Yeah, it's probably just when we went down 2-1 up to the red card. I thought he was coming into the game a bit more.
Yeah,
and then after the red card, it was just an unmitigated disaster. I can understand why he took Bruno off at half time instead of Pogba as well, but the second half performance alone from Pogba, for me, he shouldn't be starting the game certainly for a month or so for us. And it's just a shambles, man. Like the way he lets Aurier run off him for the goal, the penalty he concedes, I don't even know what he's trying to do. The way he slides in, it's the easiest penalty to give away ever for Davies, literally just to run over the top of him and win a penalty. His passing, his movement, I've lost count the amount of times where if he's got the ball on the touchline, he tries to do some mad spin, flick the ball through the player's legs and run behind him. But every single time he tries it, the guy just stands there with his legs closed and takes the ball away from him and runs away from him.
Yeah.
And it's just a shambles for me. And I appreciate that he had his coronavirus issues at the end of August, and I did say for the last couple of games I'm surprised he started, because I can't believe that he's fit. But today alone, for his performance today, he should be nowhere near the 11 when we come back from international duty for me.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Although I agree he was absolutely abysmal and has been all season. The previous 2 games. I think we are set up in all kinds of the wrong ways to get anything approaching the best out of Pogba, and I think that's been well evidenced. I think that problem has been compounded by the introduction of Bruno Fernandes, because it ain't working, this midfield three.
Yeah. But it doesn't excuse him. I agree, we're not set up to get the best out of him, but also he's not even getting the basics right. He's not even giving the minimum commitment that you would expect from a professional player.
I think that's indicative of Paul Pogba as a footballer.
Agreed.
I think he's a fair weather footballer, to be quite honest, and I think that's I do think we have enough evidence now to suggest that that probably is the case. And I also think it was the case at previous clubs, even when he was doing extremely well. And that's fine. Lots of players are like that. You know, even Bruno is awful, you know, to large degrees, and then has impacts when it matters. But Paul Pogba playing at the moment where he's playing is a complete liability defensively. He's offering nothing offensively, and there is a temperament personality issue that has always been there. When things are not going well for us as a team or for Paul Pogba personally, he is a absolute detriment to himself, the team in general, and anyone around him. You know, he is an emotional player, and he just cannot really seem to deal that well with adversity in a Manchester United shirt. And I do wonder if it's specifically in a Manchester United shirt, because I do think there is a lot of emotions around Paul Pogba at Manchester United, and even emotions within himself at Manchester United with regards to returning, the fact that it probably has been a bit of a failure so far, the fact that so much of it gets heaped on his shoulders, the fact that there's so much criticism, the fact that I'm sure he feels that there isn't enough quality around him, or that we're not playing the right kind of football. And that's why I said last year, whilst I think he's an exceptional footballer, I don't think he'll ever be an exceptional footballer at Manchester United. And I think he should go, because I think he's actually holding us back by constantly reliving these issues over and over and over again. And there is a dream scenario where we find the right system and the right players around him, and the glory days return. But I mean, is anyone else feeling like that's actually an achievable reality at this point? He's 27, 28, something like that. It just hasn't worked. And he's a brilliant footballer. He's a brilliant footballer. And I'm not saying it's necessarily his fault. I'm saying the test has been done and it has been failed, and that's just something that happens.
Yeah, agreed.
I was watching it today thinking, tactically, if you ask me to pick our best team for a must-win game, I want to now see Van der Beek in. I want to see a different shape. I want to see other people come into the fold. And, you know, someone made the point that if you had sold Pogba this summer for 40 million and got Sancho, you know, that extra money just to sign Sancho, and just played a kind of a work hard midfield, or a more balanced midfield, we might look a much better team. And of course, that's a hypothetical situation, but I think at this point, it's something that, you know, you'd have to accept is probably a real possibility. And you know, that's not Pogba's fault. I'm a huge fan of his. What I'm not a huge fan of is us holding on players that don't want to be at the club and banging our head off a wall with something that we probably have enough evidence now to suggest hasn't worked, because we're not changing it. We're playing him in the same way we've always played him. We don't really ever play him at 10. We don't ever really play him in a real midfield 3. We don't support him with the players behind him to take that defensive burden off him. We just constantly keep putting him in the same position, asking him to do the same things, and then getting the exact same return, which is the occasional moments of brilliance, the occasional dominant performance, but a lot of crap in between. So I'm done with it.
Feels like a relationship where just too much has happened.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Not bad blood as such, but just like there's those niggles. And, you know, was it after Lukaku left when he spoke about being made a scapegoat at United? And I imagine that there's probably a similar sort of feeling. And at the end of the day, you know, Pogba's still here not because he really wants to be here. He's here because, you know, because of the circumstances, because of the situation that we're in this world. You know, if he could have left this summer, then I'm sure he absolutely would have done. And that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I agree. I think the experiment's been done, as to quote Colm. I think we've tried multiple different formations, we've tried all the players, we've tried everything really, and whatever we try just isn't working. And for me, I think it probably is time now just to say, look, we've tried it. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked. You can point to 5 or 6 different things, but sometimes these signings just don't work. It's just the wrong timing, or it's just you can't find the right formation. Whatever it is, sometimes it just doesn't work out, and I do think it is probably time to be moving them on. Whether that means it's cut price next year or whatever, I think we need to be looking at it. I would quite like to see a midfield of potentially Van de Beek, Fernandes, and Matic, because I think with the 3 of them, I think you've got 3 guys that are all pretty good on the ball. I like Matic. Well, right, we had a poor performance today, but I do like Matic. I like what he provides in front of the back 4. Van de Beek, I like what I've seen so far.
I still see that as imbalanced. I think Fred McTominay needs to come in, and probably more Fred, to be honest.
Fred, I agree.
I think that'll just still result in these big gaping holes. I mean, you could literally, like, there's 30 yards between our defense and midfield and between our midfield and attack. We're just we're so gappy as a team at the moment the way we set up, and I just don't think that helps. But again, it's what they're being asked to do as well. It's not always just the exact personnel. Obviously, that has a huge impact because each player has their own skill sets that are, more or less desirable and work in combinations better, than some others. However, I still think there's a whole tactical setup naivety and also a motivation issue as well, which I think is a huge problem of players just simply not wanting to do the running or not being that interested to give that extra 1 or 2% that at that level of football makes such a huge difference. Such a huge difference. I mean, that extra 1% is Kane getting up quickly and taking that free kick, and that's not like it's not a difficult goal, but it was so easy for them because we simply weren't at that level of switched onness, concentration, effort, motivation, whatever it is, concentration. We just weren't at that level, so we just gave them that goal because they were that 2, 3, 4% better than us in that mentality.
Yeah, and I think that, as we kind of said at the start, for me, the defence just isn't talking about the back four and the goalkeeper. The defence comes from the midfield, the defence, the goalkeeper together. And Gary Neville, he must have said it about 3 times towards the end of the game. That's now Man United have conceded 11 goals in 3 Premier League games. That doesn't come just from having players like Maguire, Bailey, Lindelof, Shaw, Wan-Bissaka, whoever you want to name. That's coming from carelessness, naivety, not paying attention. Because as much as we can all point to certain players and say they're not good enough, we need to move them on, that team on the pitch today should not be losing 6-1. No chance. I mean, some of them need to be moved on. We can improve on other players. To lose that game 6-1 today, where, as we've already said, players just throw their hands up in the air when things don't come off. They lose the ball, but instead of fighting to get the ball back, they just chuck it and just let the player run away from them.
Well, we don't like defensively. We don't press intelligently as a team. It's like we press in pockets. It's kind of like it's a discretionary thing. Press if you want to. If you're feeling it in that moment, feel free to press. That ends up in a niggly foul more often than not. But then when we're on the ball, why are we never maintaining possession and control and having slow build-up play? Why are we always going for the jugular? Constantly just going for the jugular and giving the ball, just giving it back and inviting them back on.
There's a real halfway house approach about United in that we say we want to do this thing, we want to keep the ball, we want to play good football, but then as you say, we kind of don't do that. We don't retain possession well, we don't win it back half the pitch, and we gift it away too easily from Wan-Bissaka just passing to no one, or Bruno trying something that really isn't on, or something like that. So, that's a real kind of, we say we want to do one thing, but actually we're kind of doing the opposite. Then you also have this kind of style that we're meant to be implementing, this high line, win the ball back, press high, frenetic pace, fitness, and yet look at the players we've bought. Harry Maguire can't do it. Wan-Bissaka not good enough on the ball. It's Bruno gives it away cheaply. So it's again, we're saying one thing and doing another, and there's a real mismatch between what we say we want to do, what it looks like we're trying to do, and the players we've bought and the players that we pick to do that job. Because again, I just think we're setting out players to do things that don't match the things they're good at, and to me that's just a bit mad. And when we say there's no plan, when we say there's coaching issues, that's kind of what it all points toward, that there's just always this big mismatch of essentially hot air and words. We want to do this, we're a team that does this, a soundbite after a match, the boys need to do this, 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 and this, and this. And actually I'm wondering, what is the nitty-gritty detail of that in the week? What is the actual, what is the tactics meeting, what is the plan, what is the structure, what are the drills that are being worked on? Because at the moment they just sound like platitudes, because they don't match up to what I see on the pitch, and they don't match up to the personnel that you're bringing in. Again, it's without a plan, and that is the big issue.
The defense of the coaching, when we bring up this perception of there being a coaching issue, which for me is no longer, I don't see how it can be called a perception. But anyway, the response and the defence to that, particularly from the likes of Nick, and sorry Nick that you're not here to defend this, but it's always a emphasis on individual improvements that some players have made, and it's like, that's great, I agree. Ollie might spend a time with an individual player and say, right, you need to improve this, you need to start crossing more, you need to start going out, you need to start going on the outside and getting the ball in. That's what you said to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. To the likes of Martial and Rashford, maybe a bit more composure in the box and looking for a simpler, easier, cleaner finish. Great, fantastic. That isn't coaching of a team, bringing players together, trying to build chemistry up, trying to build patterns of play that they can repeat in a game. You look at the likes of, City, and it's and I appreciate they're not exactly in great form at the moment, but you see that when there's this transition here and their defense is in this shape and this person has the ball, player A makes run B, player B makes run C, and player D who's on the ball is going to drive it into the box and play it across, and it's an easy and there is just none of that. It's just like we give the players some individual freedom and expression, which is great because you see these fantastic goals that we're capable of scoring. But that shouldn't be at the cost of more scientific patterns of play that can be repeated and aren't reliant on a player just turning up and having a good game. And then it seems to be the same at the back. I understand that after Fergie, Ollie probably wants all his defenders to basically play one-on-one, man-on-man, and to be strong in doing that. The players we've got aren't strong in doing that. But it's just like we just leave them to it to improve on being better as one-to-one defenders. And there's nothing when it comes to shape. Multiple times today there was just no line. The line was all over the place. It was like a zigzag. And I don't understand why that line's not being kept and held, why we're not compacting, why we're not, pushing up and getting closer to the midfield. There was a lot of frustration under the likes of Van Hal and Mourinho, but at least you could see that, there was that shape and that system off the ball, and it didn't always work, don't get me wrong, but at least you could see what they were trying to do, and it was consistent game to game. Whereas for us, the only consistency is the inconsistency, that everyone's kind of just doing their own thing all the time.
Yeah, I think what's quite interesting is we were all, I'm sure, quite guilty of kind of sipping from the Kool-Aid a bit too much with our lockdown form and our return to last season, ending up in the heady heights of third, even if it was, on the last day. I think we've all kind of been sucked into this maybe false dawn, I guess, with this Ole's team. But one of the huge issues is, and there will be a bigger discussion about this once the window closes, but from a hierarchy perspective, the team have been so thoroughly let down through the off-season there with regards to transfer targets.
Yeah.
So much and so interestingly that I think you had Shaw coming out after either the Palace or the Brighton game and saying, look, we would all probably like to see a face or two here, to mix things up. We're maybe lacking in a few areas, which was really, you never really hear that from United players. In fact, you maybe heard it on record from Rooney. And maybe Pogba the odd time when someone's trying to engineer a move, but he was just very genuinely, when asked, said, we're a bit thin and lacking in some areas. We want to push on, and I think we all felt we were going to get that. We then didn't, and I think that has been also a huge feature in feeding into this kind of frustration, this lack of motivation, and this just kind of bum moment that the team seems to be in generally at the start of this season, that they haven't been able to shake themselves out of, that Ole hasn't been able to shake themselves out of. And again, I think, and I may be wrong because again we're recording this straight after, but I think Shaw came out to give the post-match press conference today, not Harry Maguire, not De Gea, not anyone else, but Luke Shaw, who seems to be, I find him quite honest and appraising of these things and happy to talk about them. And he also had that absolute class hatchet job on Lucas Moura, showing his frustration and a bit of energy. There's a lot of debate about whether he's the best left back for United, and that is open for debate. There may be a new one tomorrow, but at least he's showing that kind of the desire to question things, a little bit of honesty for the fans, which I think is what we would always appreciate, particularly when it comes to the plan for the club, the structure of the club, the transfers in and outs. Just to get a straight answer on something, I think would appreciate a lot of people, and to kind of help us understand the reason why this malaise is under us at the moment, because we just look to a man unmotivated, frustrated, and ill-disciplined and just not at the races. And I think that's really an interesting window as to why, and also speaks to the lack of, why is it Luke Shaw doing that? Do you know what I mean? Would you ever hang your hat on Luke Shaw being that man for your club? And again,
No,
to touch on a previous point, the lack of leadership in the club, that it's forcing Luke Shaw, credit to him, and I'm a fan of his and I like him as a player, but you would never expect him to be the person. He barely has a secure place himself. Yes, okay, he's been at the club for a few years, but where are the other leaders? I mean, that prints a pretty dire picture as well.
That's one thing I wanted to ask, actually. It's a good point about the hierarchy, and we can all see it, like the lack of activity in the transfer market. It looks like they're going to end up panic buying one or two players now. I would imagine they may be looking at a couple of players, but after this performance, just deciding to go for them. But do you think the negativity of the transfer window from the last 8, 12, 16 weeks, whatever it wants to be, is fed into the performances at the start of this season? Because it is just a general sense of apathy around the squad at the moment.
Absolutely. I'm under
Yeah,
I'm
you
under
can't
no
not.
doubt. Yeah, I'm under no doubt. I mean, I think it's a lot of things. I think our lack of break, I think starting a week later, a lot of those things, of course, issues with a lot of our players outside of the season, of course, won't have helped either.
Yeah.
But to me, it's probably the biggest thing that's been an issue. And also, that's a feeling, Ole's in a really tough spot in that regard. Don't get me wrong. He asked for players. He did well last year to finish the way he finished. We're very, down on him at the moment, but we shouldn't take away the performances in the second half of the season and the finish that we did achieve last year, even if the Europa was a bit of a disgrace at the end. He's done a good job there and deserved to be backed, and the players will have felt like they were going to get that and that they needed that. But then the other side of that coin, Jamie, is that Van der Beek's looked good, and he can't find a place for him in 3 league starts. We see the same first 11, 3 games in a row, with the only exception of Lindelof and Bailly swapping out, and yet all the games have been awful. So what message does that give to the players on the bench from Ole, which has been a long-standing problem? And I appreciate it may be a statement, but you have to know at this point, you're in the season now, mate. Do you know what I mean? You can't just make points and play the players you want to. If those 11 are playing awfully and you have new additions and decent squad players, Fred, McTominay, Van der Beek, probably the 3, but even a space for Jesse Lingard, the team needs freshened up if things aren't going well. Players need to know that they're not undroppable. So, as with everything, it seeps down from the top. Don't get me wrong. Like, that is the biggest sole issue at Manchester United at the moment, is our footballing structure and the people in charge. But everyone has their part to play. Ole shares guilt for the management of the first 3 games of this season because it's been diabolical. And, the players deserve a huge chunk of blame, but they're still getting picked. They're still getting picked and getting told to go out there and do whatever they want, seemingly.
What do you think, Alex?
Jose Mourinho, after the game, he's talking about the scoreline and whatnot. They've just won 6-1, and yet he takes the time, and usually he's the one in Ollie's position, I guess, sort of really pushing for transfers and for money that's not coming his way. That, at least that was the case at United, and he says from the top of the club, from the board to the structure, they've given us this squad, and without this squad and these options, it wouldn't be possible. But it allows us to have these crazy weeks and it allows us to rotate. Let's not forget that this was their 4th game this week.
Yeah.
They played Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then again today. Otherwise, we would arrive here naked and not be able to do these things. And he's absolutely got a point. They've been backed, and there's clearly confidence and momentum that's been built from that. But also, they are coming off of a 4-game week, which I know some people now in hindsight might say, oh, well, at this point in the season, it's nice for games to come thick and fast. We all know that had United won this game and had won it at counter, then the opposite narrative would be the one that was being perpetuated, that actually, they were tired, they've been playing, a frequency that just shouldn't be possible or allowed. And yet Kane, a couple of days after playing, a couple of days after playing, a couple of days after playing, was still the sharpest player on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, and we had arguments, we've had arguments over the past few seasons about why don't Liverpool get tired? Why don't they pick up injuries? How can they manage to maintain such an immensely high level with such a small squad? And the reason is that motivation, positivity, and momentum matter as much to recovery, fitness, and appetite for putting in the hard yards than actual, physiological management of your body. Yes, there are limits. However, mental is as much important as physical. You can be tired and sore, and if you want to do it, and if you feel like the team's pulling in a good way and that you're enjoying your football, you will do it. On the opposite side of that is you will feel like you have no energy in your legs, jelly-legged, trudging around. Everything becomes difficult once your mentality decides that it's not worth doing, or that it's not going well, or that it's annoying you, or that it's frustrating you, or that you didn't get what you wanted in the summer, that you don't like the players that you play with, that you find you maybe aren't getting the right service or anything like that. And that saps energy more so than playing 3 games, 4 games in a week, because they do the recovery, they get the fitness. It's a mentality thing for me more than it is a physiological thing, and I'm a firm believer in that. I think it's been evidenced today. And going into the game, I knew that Tottenham would be fresher and able to press us more and more energetic. I just knew it because they're in a good vein of form. They're in a kind of time of positivity, and they've had a very good window. They have a lot of things to be pleased with at the moment, and we're the exact opposite, and that feeds into your performance, that feeds into your energy, and that feeds into your performance. It's just, to me, that's just the way it is, and we have to buck that. And sometimes a big embarrassing defeat and a watershed moment like this can do that for you. Players can do a bit of soul searching. You can hit rock bottom. It can force us to change things. You can have the barmy. I mean, I said at halftime, I hope Ole literally assaults players in there. I mean, cups, whatever you want. I don't know what he wants to do, but I wouldn't blame him in the slightest. I would have been. I don't know if I could even speak to them, be that angry. But sometimes you need that, and I think that's the only slight glimmer of hope, although we'll have to wait for 2 weeks. Teams go away for internationals, and I think the true value of it will be lost in that. However, a response is essential now, and hopefully
absolutely
some new ideas and some changes, and I imagine a few faces. I mean, Martial's out for a couple of games now, and you might see a Uruguayan playing instead, and that can be a bit of a lift, a new left back, stuff like that. But sadly, I don't think it's going to be the season we hoped it was going to be.
Yeah, before we go any further, just for me, as said at the top of the show, it's certainly my top 3 worst United performances ever. I can't think of many worse. Maybe the City game, maybe the Arsenal game, where we got beat 3-0, I think it was, and we were pretty soundly beaten that day under LVG in a couple of the Moyes defeats. But in terms of just general apathy, that's the worst I've seen. What about you boys? Was that the worst you've ever seen? Was there any other?
Sevilla with Mourinho. Sevilla was a. I mean, pretty much every time we play Sevilla.
Sevilla and Olympiacos were definitely up there.
Yeah.
There's the worst are the, well, it depends what you mean by worst, I guess, but you're losing the finals and stuff, and you're angry and you're upset. But with this, it's the apathy that makes it all that worse, because one, there's some sort of expectation behind it. It's not that surprising. It's kind of par for the course as well. Like we get these, they happen, and you're kind of somewhat accepting of that.
I actually sort of disagree about that. The apathy is, don't get me wrong, I totally understand what you mean. But I would also say that we have been in the wilderness since Fergie left. And I've never really felt, under Moyes, I knew it was a disaster. Under LVG, you could see what was happening, you wanted it, but it also became very quickly apparent that it was never going to get there. Mourinho, it was just always too divisive, and you kind of knew it. But that end of the season under Ole was hands down the best I've felt about Manchester United since Fergie retired.
Oh, agreed. And this summer should have been easy,
Exactly.
because it just needed those couple of 1 or 2 signings for us to kick on, for the confidence levels to remain in the club. And instead, we've had months of players being beaten down, in the press, waiting, expecting of something that just isn't there and isn't coming. And then now they're at a point where they're trying to respond, and produce performances that they maybe were expecting to have a bit more support on. And I totally agree with that. Like, in terms of an angerness at the state of what we're in, totally agree. I guess it was more of this isn't surprising because of what's been going on. As I said earlier, it was an on-the-pitch performance worthy of our current off-the-pitch performance, and that it was a shambles, and that it was clueless, that it felt like we didn't have a plan, or any plan that we did have got thrown out the window, and just wasn't good enough. And then there was no real response or reaction to that plan, and it's appalling, and and that is infuriating. But it's a wider state of things than just this game. Don't get me wrong, though. It's been a while since I've been angry at a game of football, despite probably a lot of performances in the last year or so that could have done so. But I was furious, like coming onto this podcast at the very beginning. It felt like hitting a wall.
Yeah, it was infuriating. I was the angriest I've been in a long time after that performance. There was just,
obviously, the window and everything else has added to that anger, though, right? That's the thing. It's not just the performance; it's everything, outside of it that just kind of made it feel like this was this was always going to happen. As you said earlier, Colm, it was just the culmination of everything that's been going on.
I mean, I've felt pretty angry since Friday, I think it was, when Ollie gave his press conference, though, because I've been pretty confident all window, thinking, there'll definitely be players coming in. But when I was watching Ollie's press conference on Friday, I just thought he looked a beaten man. That's the first time I've seen him in an interview look like he was fed up with what was happening behind
Yeah.
the scenes.
As far as he's concerned, he's done his job. He got us top 4, right?
Yeah.
And if you get top 4, you deserve some backing because you have to spend money to maintain, never mind to improve. Never mind to try and catch up to the likes of Liverpool and City, who again have only spent more to get further ahead. You have to spend money just to maintain. And, with a Spurs up and coming this season, with an Arsenal clearly in a better shape than they were before, we needed that backing. And then kind of now, whoever you get in, we're on the back foot.
Yeah.
We're on the back foot.
I thought at the start of the window, I've seen fans talking on Twitter, talking on the Red Calf forum, all saying, we need to sign these players, X, Y, Z, for depth. We need to sign one player. The whole point was we had a good finish to the end of the season last season. We got into third. We got ourselves Champions League football. Okay, the Europa League didn't pan out, but we had a good end to the season. And you were sitting looking at the 11 saying, yeah, the 11's pretty good. We don't have much depth behind that. The whole point is you don't just concentrate on improving the squad, so bringing in players that are okay ability that might fit in the squad. The whole point is you improve the 11. You go and find better players, or players similar to the level you've got, but maybe have a bit more hunger and desire to push on, and then want to come in and challenge players for their places.
There was some obvious, clear gaps in the squad that needed improvement, and the frustration for me is that every year we ignore those gaps, and then the next year we can't fill the new gaps that have occurred.
Yeah,
because there's now and there's now gaps that we've just in very recent memory spent about 200 million on that defence, and I would bin every single one of them today and replace every single one of them. And some of those are only at the club a year. And I know that's maybe harsh to say, maybe knee jerky, but I mean, I feel like there's a good body of evidence there that Wan-Bissaka is not going to be the right back that we need. That there's concerns over Harry Maguire. He still needs a partner, and left back is at best average. So even the bit of the team that allegedly we'd fixed when Ole got his first window is our weakest part of the team. So it's just it's not progress whatsoever. It's a regression, and it's worrying times because after the international break we have Newcastle, which might be an okay game, but then we have Chelsea, PSG, Arsenal, Leipzig, and Everton. And at the moment, I mean, that is just make or break stuff. And
yeah, it's a horror run for us at the moment, the form we're on. Yeah, there's none of those games you'd fancy coming at the moment.
In a sense, I'm okay with that because it's just like put up or shut up, and it will really show us, okay, is there something to work with here, or do we need to blow this up and start again with players leaving and a new manager? Because you'll have a very good indication in the next 2 months as to really where we're at, and they need to get their act together extremely quickly because that is not an easy run of fixtures.
Well, the other 2 times we've made the Champions League since Fergie, I think this is only the 3rd time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Not including, obviously, Moyes was in it because of Fergie, but other than that, we've only got it in it 2 times. First time under Van Gaal, we managed to push for top 4, incredibly difficult, and then we got knocked out of the group stages under Mourinho to Sevilla, and it feels like this time we're coming up against the Leipzig and a PSG incredibly tough group, and we're just not the squad's not fit for purpose to be dealing with that, and it's hard to be confident it was actually getting out of that group, and then it's kind of like,
funnily enough,
well, what was it all for?
I could actually see us doing quite well, even in the current form and the current situation that we're in. I could actually see us doing quite well in Europe and having a disaster season in the league. I mean, mid to bottom half.
I'd have agreed
for a large swathe, and I would be, that's not good enough to me. That's, the league is the bread and butter, and like if we go to the Champions League group stage with that group, depending on the performances, I'm not really that, okay, but the league form is what I'm interested in, and the day to day, and also it's just I could stomach Spurs beating us today. So that's not a problem. They're a good team. It's the manner of these performances. Brighton should have beaten us. Crystal Palace did beat us. Brighton should have scored as many goals as Spurs scored today. There's no reason why the only reason was poor finishing. So this is now a trend. It's not getting beat once by Mourinho Spurs is not life or death. We're only a point behind City, okay, but it's the performances are shambolic. They're shambolic. So if we play well and get beat by Newcastle, I just need to see us playing well.
Yeah. Right, well, before we finish off, though, it does look like we are getting 2 players in. We've already touched on one, a certain Uruguayan up front, Cavani. What are the thoughts on him?
I mean, the problem is there's faults on him as an individual, and then there's the faults on the manner and the need for us to be bringing or even asking the question or having this conversation, because it's quite clear that, we've messed up and we are essentially panic buying a player who doesn't really want or care for the club. What he wants and cares for is a pay packet. But, he's a professional who's got some fantastic experience. Maybe he'll come in and actually do a decent job. But it's clearly an opportunistic panic buy, and it's the sort of purchase that, we've been saying or trying to give credit for saying that, since Ollie's come in, we're not having to rely on those signings. We've been looking for players who have years, who have experience and are maybe Premier League proven, but are also ready to make a step up, who we feel, are coming with good quality of character and high personality traits. I've got some of my own thoughts on how, how much merit there is in all those statements, but I can understand where people are coming from with that. And then we're kind of undoing that with this transfer. To me, it's clearly opportunistic panic purchase, but maybe he'll do all right. Maybe he'll do all right. And I do think we need cover for Martial. Clearly we do now. But, I do feel we need some cover. We need some experience. Maybe there's a leader in there. I don't know enough about his character to say whether that's the case or not. But ultimately, it's telling that we're having to look at him as an answer in the first place.
Colm, anything to add on that?
No, I am not fond of it at all. And there's been enough negativity, so I don't need to hear more about my thoughts on our transfer window, but there will be a full transfer pod coming next week to go into the absolute ins and outs of that, but I can tell you.
The only other one I've seen is that's Tellez, the left back from Porto, more or less done and dusted as well. His stats are pretty good from what I've seen for an attacking fullback. I know he takes penalties, but he seems to take free kicks as well. He's quite accurate with that. He takes good corners as well from what I've seen when I've watched Porto a few times. So, okay, might be a bit suspect defensively according to some people on Twitter, but does look as though he's going to offer a fair bit of threat going down there.
All right, though, because he's got Maguire behind him, so no worries.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what they were like before they got to United, because watch him do none of that or slowly regress to the level of everyone else around him. And for that reason, I just can't even bring myself to even look at possible transfers or try and get like a little silver lining from this day through that. And I really do appreciate what you're trying to give the listeners there, Jamie. I do, and it's valiant of you. But really, you're mollycoddling them because they shouldn't accept that. It's a travesty of our performance, and our transfer window was every bit as bad as our 6-1 defeat to Spurs today, and that is the only message that we need to consider today. And what we need to do is just listen to the podcast, vent that feeling of complete exasperation, desolation, and personally speaking, depression in relation to that event. I mean, I'm not going to even be able to talk to anyone for a week here, but we just need to let go of that and, find something else in your life other than Manchester United and football to concentrate on for a little while throughout this international break, please, because it's going to get tough.
At the time of speaking, Aston Villa leading Liverpool 2-0, if that's anything. But I feel like in 60 minutes, Liverpool will have won this game, 4-2. Yeah.
My advice would be become an LA Lakers fan and watch the last of the finals, or I don't know, just pick a new sport and have a second team for a backup. That's what I do. Something to eke a little joy from when Manchester United inevitably let you down.
Said by a true glory hunter there, Colm.
Yeah.
Well, my name on the forum is Vault Dweller, so I think I'll just go away and play Fallout 4 all week.
That's a fair shout.
Oh, Mo Salah, goal. Liverpool have got one back. There you go.
But as Colm's kind of touched on there, what we will do is aim to have a transfer pod wrapped up in the next wee while or so. We know it's been a depressing day. We can only hope that it improves somewhat after the international break.
I feel better for talking to you two fine fellas.
Thanks very much, man. I feel a bit more relieved as well, to say the least. So hopefully that's done the listeners some good.
Very cathartic, and just to add, at least if nothing else, we couldn't have lost 6-1 to a nicer fellow and manager, Jose Mourinho.
Yeah, there wasn't anything personal or intimate about that as well. Yeah, that wasn't.
Well, on that note, we can all go to bed, forget about this game, and just look forward to when we're back in a fortnight and hope we're a bit better. So, on that note, it's good night from me, troops.
Cheerio.
Good night from me. Stay sane.